Hey, guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. I've lived in my house for over 15 years and never had any issues with neighbors until Karen moved in next door about a year ago. Right from the start, she rubbed me the wrong way. She's one of those loud, nosy types who's all up in everyone's business. But I tried to be polite and give her a chance. Big mistake. It started small at first. Karen letting her dog poop on my lawn and not cleaning it up. Karen deciding my fence was on her property line and attaching things to it without asking. Annoying things, but I let them slide. Then, about 2 months ago, she came knocking on my door saying she was having a big garage sale and needed to put signs up on my lawn. I politely declined, saying I don't allow signs for events I'm not associated with. Karen got real huffy about that. She went on about how inconsiderate I was being and how her sale was going to be huge, and it was only fair to let her advertise. I stood my ground and she stomped off in a fit. The day of the sale arrived, and boy was she right about one thing. It was huge. Cars were lined up and down the street as people showed up to get first dibs on the junk Karen had piled up in her garage and driveway. But it didn't stop there. The cars kept coming, and soon people were parking along the sides of the road too. Then they started parking in my driveway. And not just a couple vehicles. Dozens of them, all crammed into my driveway and the grass beside it. I came outside and couldn't believe my eyes. There were cars blocking me in my own garage on my own property. I walked over to Karen's house and the sale was in full swing. People were milling around, music was blaring. I finally got Karen's attention and told her all the cars needed to get off my property immediately. Karen laughed in my face. "Oh, don't be silly. This is a public road. Anyone can park here. I can't control where people decide to leave their cars." I was fuming. This was in no way a public road. It was my personal driveway and yard. I told Karen as much and demanded she have people move their vehicles at once. "I'm running a business here," Karen snapped back. "Why should all these customers have to park far away just because you're being selfish? It's not hurting anything. Get over it." I couldn't believe her audacity. Get over it? This was outright trespassing. I took photos of the cars crowding my property and told Karen I was calling the police to sort this out. She didn't seem worried in the least, waving me off and going back to her sale. It took almost an hour for the police to arrive. By then, most of the cars were gone, but there were still a few parked on my grass. I showed the officers my property line and the photos I had taken earlier that day. Karen stuck to her absurd story that it was a public road and she shouldn't be responsible for where people parked. Thankfully, the police knew she was full of it. They made it clear to her that she had no right to allow people to park on my private property. Karen argued and complained, but eventually she gave in when they threatened to shut down her garage sale altogether. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but of course, Karen being Karen, she had to escalate the issue. A week later, I received a letter from a lawyer claiming I was obstructing access to a public road and interfering with lawful business activities. Karen was threatening to sue me if I ever prevented her or community members from accessing the road again. I couldn't help but laugh out loud reading this nonsense. Did she really think she could bully me into believing my own driveway was a public road? Unfortunately for Karen, I happen to have a close friend who's an excellent real estate lawyer. I showed him the letter and he just shook his head in amusement. "This is obviously absurd. Don't worry about it. There's no chance of her winning any lawsuit." To be safe, my friend helped me draft a legal cease and desist letter in response, making it crystal clear that Karen had no right to use my private driveway at any time for any purpose. Karen clearly didn't expect me to fight back legally. After receiving my letter, she didn't contact me again about the issue. I did notice her glaring angrily from her yard whenever I pulled in and out of the public road, aka my driveway, but she seems to have gotten the message to keep her cars and her wacky legal claims off my property. This experience has definitely taught me a lesson, though. Don't ignore the warning signs with a nightmare neighbor. At the first sign of trouble, stand up for yourself or you'll regret it. I just hope one day Karen moves away, but who knows what kind of stunt she'll try and pull next. The next one is a pro-revenge story. As a bit of background, my 3 roommates and I moved into a housing community that consists of cookie-cutter townhomes. All of these homes have garages that open onto streets winding through the community. This is important later, with your front door opening to a path on the other side of your house. There are also some free parking spots on the edge of the community where there are no houses. When we first moved in, We quickly found out that parking could be a bit of a pain during the day, especially when people had guests over on weekends. Now, my roommates and I admittedly have more cars than the average family. Since we usually have to commute for work, we each have one car. We try to make parking easier by using the garage, but we all have tons of sporting equipment, so we can usually only fit one car in the garage. When all the parking spots are full, we just park our cars right up against the garage and leave them there during the day or overnight. We'd seen other neighbors do it, and it still left ample room for people driving on the street to get by. Well, one day, a neighbor we'll call Crappy Neighbor came up, while my roommates and I were in the garage organizing some stuff. He told us that we couldn't park there overnight as it's against community rules. Before we had a chance to respond, he added, "And if you do it again, I will personally make sure you're towed." His first comment was pretty reasonable. We'd just moved in and didn't know that rule. But his second comment made him sound like an ass and wasn't necessary. One of my roommates simply responded that we didn't know as we'd just moved in and we wouldn't park there overnight anymore. Crappy Neighbor, clearly trying to assert his dominance, responded with, "Good, you better not because I'll be watching." From then on, we followed those rules. If we parked in front of our garage during the day, we made sure to move before going to sleep. This worked out for a while until one fateful day. One of my roommates stopped by quickly after work to grab some dinner and clothes before heading to his girlfriend's. This was around 7 p.m., so he just parked up against the garage, as it would be quicker than the parking spaces. Plus, it was early enough that he didn't think he'd get towed. Around 8 p.m., he went to head out, and his car was gone. Guess who was there, though? Crappy Neighbor, standing right outside. Immediately, he said to my roommates, "Told you you were going to get towed if you parked here again." Crappy Neighbor and my roommate argued for a bit before my roommate came back inside and called the tow company. It turned out they were closed, so he'd have to get his car in the morning. The kicker? They were going to charge him an overnight fee. All in all, it came out to $500, which isn't a small amount of money for us. This neighbor has been an ass to us since we moved in, and even though it wasn't my car that was towed, I took this personally. To make sure we didn't get towed again, we decided to read the community rules, and lo and behold, we found out that the street in front of the garage is actually considered a fire lane, and no one is supposed to park there at any point during the day. Between Crappy Neighbor treating us poorly, and the fact that we could hear him yelling at his wife every night, not a big detail to the story, but just wanted to add to my point that this guy just sucked, I started to plan my revenge. Since quarantine started, I've been able to work from home, and my desk conveniently looks out onto the street between the houses. This means that I can clearly see Crappy Neighbor's garage. I started to take notice of when he parked his car out in front of his garage. For about 2 weeks, I noticed that he would come home around 1 p.m. and leave again at 2 p.m. On the third week, I decided I would begin the revenge. On Monday, true to his schedule, he stopped by around 1 p.m. After about 10 minutes, I gave the tow company a call and reported that he was parked in the fire lane and asked if they could come and remove his car. 20 minutes later, a tow truck rolled up, hooked his car up, and towed it away. About 15 minutes later, Crappy Neighbor came out, and I could hear him start to yell back into his house, presumably at his wife. He then left and didn't come back until later that evening after he'd retrieved his car. It was amusing to do this, and I made sure to send snaps to my roommates who don't work from home, but I wasn't done yet. This jackass apparently didn't learn the first time because literally the next day he parked in front of his garage again. What did I do? Well, the exact same thing as the day before, of course. Again, Crappy Neighbor came out, realized his car was gone, yelled at his wife, and then went to get it. After this time, he was a bit smarter and parked in an actual spot before going in to get his lunch or whatever he did there midday. He did this for about 2 weeks before he decided that it was okay to park in front of his garage again. Who was still sitting at their desk every day and noticed this immediately? Well, me, of course. And being the concerned resident that I am, I immediately called the tow company. And off his car went again. Again, this was met with yelling. I wish this had a more satisfying ending, but after this third time, I decided I would stop because I genuinely felt bad for his wife, whom he seemed to yell at as if it were her fault that he was a dumbass. What I can tell you is that it definitely cost him over $1K. If he hadn't gotten my roommate's car towed, we wouldn't have ever found that fun little rule. The best part was that several of my neighbors would have their cars parked there at the same time, and they'd never have their cars towed, which made it all the better when his was. We have had a number of other encounters with him since this happened, and I have another story that involves the actual homeowner association that I'll probably write later. That one is still ongoing though, so we'll see how it ends up. The next one is a petty revenge story. It was January 2022. A new wave of COVID hit, and it devastated the workforce in the major cities here. On average, about half the workforce for any industry was homesick for about a week at the same time. Shelves in supermarkets weren't stocked because there weren't enough workers to keep them full. The number of bus routes was cut in half. The list goes on. At my retail store, all but 2 of us were sick. With 2 people on staff, we couldn't get to everything, so we had to decide what parts of the job we'd neglect. Most of our revenue is from online sales, so we decided to close the store and focus on dispatching online orders. We still had to answer phone calls and emails, though, so we were very stressed. This was only happening in the major cities, of course. More rural locations dodged the major disruptions. One day I got a call from a customer. He placed an online order the day prior, paid for express post, but noticed it hadn't been sent. He called, asked why it hadn't been sent. I looked on his account and saw he lived in a rural town hours away. This was the conversation. Customer: Hi, I placed an order yesterday with express post. Why hasn't it been sent yet? Me: I'm very sorry, but there are only 2 of us on staff because of COVID, and we are doing the best we can to keep up with the online orders. Customer: But I paid for express. Me: Yes, and as I explained, there are only 2 of us on staff. We've had to close the store, and there are a lot of orders to pack, which we do from oldest to newest. We're trying our best. Customer: Well, your best isn't good enough. I paid for express. It should have been sent out by now. My best wasn't good enough? What an absolute piece of work. At this point, I had dealt with enough stress, so I let him have it. Me: Paying for express doesn't mean we pack the order faster. It means that once the courier has it, they deliver it to you faster. That extra money you spent doesn't go to me or this company. It goes to the courier. There are orders older than yours. They have priority as they have waited longer than yours and will be packed first. Customer: I don't care. You need to ship it today. Me: I can't promise that. Do you have any idea what COVID has done to the workforce here? Customer: No, and I don't care. If you don't ship my order today, I promise I'll never shop with you again. I genuinely laughed out loud at that. Me: I literally could not care less. It's no skin off my nose. At that point, I hung up. For the entree of my revenge, I purposely skipped his order even though I caught up to it. It got sent the next day. The main course, though, was quite satisfying. I blocked his account so he couldn't shop with us again. He promised he wouldn't, so I wanted to make sure he didn't break his promise. He tried to, though. He made another account. I recognized the name and confirmed it was him through the shipping address. I canceled the order and processed the refund. For revenge's dessert, I did something truly petty. When you process a refund, you reverse the payment made by the debit card. You can put a note in it when you do so the customer knows why that money is reappearing in their bank. The note I put was, to help you keep your promise. The next one is a malicious compliance story. A few years ago, I worked at an exotic car dealership. We were the largest in the world for our brand, which will remain nameless for this post. And the exotic car side was managed by one of the owners, a manager we'll call Jim, and 2 others my age, who did most of the grunt work with me. We sold cars in all 50 U.S. states and would ship them wherever they needed to go. We all worked on every deal and were paid based on the profit of the dealership, not individual sales. Jim was a major kiss-ass to the owner who oversaw our department. He wasn't good at his job, but he was good at playing the game needed to stay on the owner's good side. He treated myself and the other younger guys poorly and tried to do as little work as possible. He was openly racist, openly sexist, and knew nothing about the cars we sold or their main competition. Jim's main responsibility was to send out all paperwork to customers and make sure everything was set so we could release the car. A big part of this was making sure the car was registered before shipping it out if they financed through the manufacturer's financial arm. Most did for a slight discount. This often meant sending all registration paperwork to the customer to go register it locally. Jim was the only one allowed to do this, as our manager had inherent distrust for the younger guys, even though we genuinely did great work. You don't get to hash one in the world for your brand if we weren't doing a good job. Well, when the owner wasn't there, Jim would often do nothing all day and then send some paperwork right before the end of the day. On the day things came to a head, he spent the morning shopping for pellet smokers and a cruise for his family to go on, and kept interrupting me to show me the different options he was looking at. Meanwhile, I was handling 2 in-person deliveries and dealing with all showroom traffic. In short, at the end of his day, he didn't get the paperwork sent out, so he told me to do it. I explained that the owner made it clear he's the only one allowed to send the paperwork out for registration, but he said, just send the paperwork out. So that's exactly what I did. The title needed to be filled out with the info for the financing company, or they'd have no claim to that car and the registration would show no lien. So I sent the blank title out to the customer, knowing that meant they could just sign it and register it as if they didn't have a loan. The customer noticed and asked my manager why he left the lien holder off the title, but CC'd our whole department. The owner saw this and freaked out, shouting at my manager, saying, "How could you mess this up? It's so simple," which led to my manager having to admit he interrupted my actual work to make me send it out while not clarifying that he hadn't even filled out the title yet and that I had to do that. They sent an overnight envelope to the customer to send it back to us, then we had to overnight it again once we filled it out. He got an earful, and the owner never let him live it down. I quit and moved into software sales, network monitoring, code-level app security monitoring, and I'll never work in a dealership again. The next one is an entitled people story. Since there's only a week left of summer, I decided to take the kids to the local amusement water park today. As I've gotten older, the rides have gotten a little tougher on me. In addition, my daughter tends to get motion sick rather easily. I don't like the way motion sickness pills make me feel, so I always take a Ziploc baggie full of ginger candy along to prevent and soothe nausea. Today I had chewy mango ginger candies, hard plain ginger candies, and hard lemon ginger candies. For those who've never had ginger candy, it is spicy. The lemon ginger is probably the mildest. The plain ginger is just plain hot. The mango ginger are sweet and spicy, but they also stick to your teeth like crazy. They're definitely an acquired taste. As we are standing in line for the log ride, I pull out my baggie. I choose a lemon one, as does my son, 13. My daughter, 12, asks for a mango one. While I'm fishing a mango one out, I hear the kid in front of us tell his mom that he, around 7-ish, wants some candy. His mom distractedly says she doesn't have any candy. The boy says, "But she does." He turns to me and asks for one. I tell him I don't really think he'd like my candy. By this time, his mom has focused on the interaction. As the kid starts to whine that of course he'd like my candy, his mom just huffs and says, "You've got a whole baggie. Can't you give him just one? Come on, don't be greedy." "Oh, you said the magic word there, lady." I say, "All right," and dig out a lemon one. I'm not completely heartless. That's when the kid whines that he wants mango. Mango is his favorite. I tell him lemon is better, but he insists on mango. I tell him it's kinda sticky as I hang it over. The kid rips it open, shoves it in his mouth, gets in 3 quick chews while my kids stare at him. Then he actually starts to taste it, and a look of horror comes over his face. He screams and tries to spit it out. He's jumping around and flapping his arms. His mom is panicking and asking what's wrong. He's screaming that it's bad and it's hot and he wants it out. His mom tells him to spit it out. That's when I pipe up with the very helpful, "It's really sticky. What's left is probably stuck in his teeth. He'll have to wait for it to melt off if he doesn't want to chew." The mom looks at me in disbelief and shrugs. Then she asks what in the hell I gave her son. Probably should have asked that sooner, lady. I answer, "Ginger candy, it's good for nausea." I'm pretty sure I'd be dead if looks really could kill. We gotta move up in line 2 spaces though because she whisked her kid off to a water fountain. I'd like to think the kid will think twice about demanding things from strangers. Plus, it was entertaining. Overall, the kids and I counted it as a win. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.